Old Stormalong Finds a Man-Sized Ship by Paul Robert Walker. Old Stormalong was the greatest sailor who ever sailed the seas. He stood 4 fathoms high, drank his soup from a Cape Cod dory, and ate a shark for dinner with ostrich eggs on the side. When he was finished, he stretched out on the deck and picked his teeth with an 18-foot oar. Now, a fathom is the height of a good-sized man, and a dory is a fair-sized rowboat. So old Stormalong, well, he was a mighty big sailor. He had a hard time fitting on an ordinary ship, so he went from ship to ship, just trying to get comfortable. Finally, he ended up as boatswain on the Lady of the Sea, the biggest ship in the Atlantic. At least, that's what Stormy thought. After a long voyage through the Caribbean, the Lady was heading for her home port of Boston. As she neared the Jersey coast just off Barnegat Light, the weather turned bad, and the Lady, big as she was, tossed like a toy on the huge waves. As Stormy peered through the growing tempest, he caught sight of something totally unexpected. A new city was floating calm as could be on the stormy sea. "It's unnatural," he exclaimed. "How could the landlubbers build a city on the sea?" But as the Lady drew closer, he realized it wasn't a city at all. It was a ship, the biggest ship he'd ever seen. It made the Lady of the Sea look like a rowboat. Even from a distance, he could read the name painted on the huge bow in letters 20 feet high: Corsair. Stormy leaned over the rail and gazed in admiration. "Now that's a ship," he said with a sigh. "Aye, a man could stretch his legs on a ship like that." Without bothering to take his gear from below, Stormy jumped over the side and swam toward the Corsair. The seas were rough, but his powerful strokes brought him alongside the huge ship in a few minutes. He called for a rope and pulled himself aboard. "And who might you be?" asked the captain. "Alfred Bulltop Stormalong," Stormy replied. "At your service, sir." "Well, sign the log," said the captain. "We can use a big man like you." Stormy took a look around. The first thing he noticed was the horses, a whole stableful right on the deck. "A horseboat, is she?" asked Stormy. The captain laughed and patted Stormy on the back of the knee. "Horseboat, my eye," he said. "Those are for the men on watch. The deck's so big, they have to ride around it." Stormy smiled and took a deep breath of the tangy salt air. "Aye," he said, "she's the ship for me." And so she was. The Corsair carried over 600 men to keep her running trim. A man had to get out his compass to find his way from fore to aft. The sails were so big that they had to be made in the Sahara Desert, just to give the sailmakers room to spread them out. Bunkhouses and galleys were built up and down the masts, and the crow's nest was lost in the clouds. If a young man climbed the rigging, he was an old man by the time he came down. Until Stormy came aboard, it took 32 men just to turn the wheel. But old Stormalong could handle it steady by himself. Oh, he was a sight to see. A strong, handsome, 4-fathom man in a pea-coat as big as an ordinary sail. His black beard speckled with spray, his huge hands wrapped around the steering pegs. Dark eyes fixed on the horizon. Stormy was the only man aboard who could actually see where the ship was going. The Corsair could ride through an average storm as if she were floating on a mill pond. In fact, during all the years that old Stormalong handled the wheel, only 2 storms ever blew her off course. The first was a September gale in the North Atlantic. The wind blew and blew, whipping the huge sails and spraying cold salt water across the decks until it was hard to tell whether a man was on the ship or in the sea. The fog was so thick that Stormy couldn't see the end of his beard, but he held the great wheel for 2 weeks straight, day and night without eating or sleeping. Finally, the winds died down and the fog lifted. When the sun rose over the cold blue water, the navigator discovered that they had been blown into the North Sea, and they were heading south, straight for disaster. You see, the courser was much too big to turn around, and a mite too big to pass through the English Channel. Old Stormalong held the wheel steady while the officers rowed around the deck shouting orders and watching the sides of the ship. As the courser approached the narrowest point of the channel, between Calais and cliffs of Dover, the captain ordered the sails reefed and the men into the lifeboats. "Hold fast!" shouted Stormy. "I think we can make it, sir." "Are you sure?" asked the captain. "It'll be close," said Stormy, "but if ye send all hands over and lay a coat of soap on the sides, we just might squeeze through. Better coat it extra heavy on the starboard. Those Dover cliffs look mighty rough." The captain ordered the crew to coat the sides as thick and slippery as they could. When the ship hit the bottleneck, she just squeezed through. It was so tight that the soap on the starboard side rubbed off against the cliffs. It's still there today, and that's why they're called the White Cliffs of Dover.